a South Carolina businessman with a resume that stretches much further than that. Today, I'm sitting down with our very first Democratic candidate for governor, Billy Webster. We're going to talk about his ties to top Democrats, his position on some of the biggest issues, and just a touch of South Carolina conservative in his platform. I'm Nick Reagan, and this is We the Palmetto. We talked to Low Country voters. Trump was in true campaign form. Voting is officially underway. Joe Biden spoke here in the heart of downtown.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You can join the conversation by sending me an email to wcscpolitics@live5news.com. All right, joining me now is Billy Webster, a Democratic candidate for governor. And actually, you're our first Democratic candidate for governor that we've been able to wrangle into our podcast studio. So first off, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate being here.
Okay, so when I was setting up this interview, your staff told me that you are an early riser, and they can often expect, a couple of emails before they've even had their first cup of coffee.
Right.
What does the daily morning routine look like for a successful businessman like yourself?
I've probably just natured this way. I've been getting up at 4:30 in the morning since I was 16 years old. I guess part of that were the jobs I worked when I was in high school and college, but I've been a runner since I was probably 18. And in order to get a morning run in of some decent length, you got to get up early and get going, or else the day gets away from you pretty quick.
Wow, yeah, and certainly in Charleston, if you want to run, you need to do it early morning or late night. So,
yeah, nowadays it's not only exercise, but it's also you got to beat the traffic anywhere you are, and that means front end, not back end.
Layers and layers of complications on this one. One of the sort of motifs of your campaign is this sticky note business.
Yep.
Could you give me the rundown on the sticky note business?
Sure. I actually even brought the sticky note.
Yeah.
So growing up, my mom had a sticky note on our refrigerator, and it was very simple, and it was there my entire life. It would fall off, and somebody'd kick it on the refrigerator, and she'd rewrite it and stick it back up. And it said very simply, "Don't talk, just do." That was the way my parents lived their lives, and that was the way they expected me to live mine. And I've tried to do that my whole life. I have started 4 successful businesses in 4 different industries. I've worked for 2 presidents, the most recent of which was spent 4 years working for Bill Clinton, 2 years running scheduling in advance in the White House, which is probably one of the most difficult logistical jobs on the planet. I was chief of staff for our former much beloved governor and Secretary of Education, Dick Riley. And in my sort of community-facing life, I've been involved in the issues that I care most about and have found their way into my campaign. I was chairman of the board of Prisma Health, used to be called Greenville Health System, which is the largest healthcare system in the state. I was chairman of the board of the Nature Conservancy, which is the largest conservation organization in the state, and I chaired the board of Converse College in Spartanburg, which is one of South Carolina's sort of preeminent women's colleges, now co-ed, but a real jewel in the crown of higher education in South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the sort of moniker that your campaign has been given, or your name has been given, is businessman.
Right.
It's always businessman Billy Webster. But you've been kind of inextricably linked to politics and these various boards that have had political tendrils in them for your entire career. What do you think that says about you as a person and as potentially the leader of the state?
Well, start with a bit of a story. So when I was little, my father and Dick Riley were friends growing up, lived on Augusta Road in Greenville, close to each other. And one of my earliest memories about politics is my dad and Dick Riley sitting at our really ugly green metal round kitchen table trying to figure out how to raise $350 for Dick to run for the South Carolina House of Representatives. And so I was kind of around politics, but not from an elected side. I've never run for political office, never really thought I would. But politics has always been kind of in the background of everything I've done. And politics has become a bit of a difficult word. It's become something that it was not when I was growing up. I would tend to use the word governing at this point. People like Dick Riley and Bill Clinton that I worked for got a lot done because they were able to govern outside of the viciousness of politics that it has become today. They both had lots of Republican support. Dick Riley passed a penny sales tax in this state, which would be unthinkable today at the state level. But he did it with business, faith leaders, community activists, and all the constituencies that benefited from a better public education system. Bill Clinton, another story, during the days of the contract with America, Newt Gingrich would stand on the steps of the Capitol and harangue Bill Clinton all day long. And Clinton would sit in the Oval Office and kind of have one eye on the TV and a wry smile on his face. And at the end of the day, he'd say, "Get Newt over here for dinner. We got stuff to do." And out of those conversations, which, you can go back to Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill and their relationship. But Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich actually had a relationship that translated into the last two balanced budgets that this country has had, welfare reform, the child health program, we call it CHIPS, and sort of a successful resolution to the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo and Bosnia. So I have seen governing up close and how that works. You have to reach across the aisle, meet people where they are. And I view most of the issues that face our state as issues that aren't Republican issues or Democratic issues, but they're issues that South Carolina has to solve if we're going to be the kind of state we deserve to be.
Well, let's talk about the biggest, hottest political football right now, which is redistricting. I know that you were paying attention yesterday when the Senate was discussing whether or not to move forward with redistricting in this state.
Right.
We also know the president has pushed our own members, our own state house members, to get this done for him, to turn the state into a 7-0 Republican congressional advantage. I wonder what your takeaways were from paying attention to what was going on yesterday, and how you would have handled the situation if you were governor.
Right. Well said. A lot of questions wrapped up in that. Let's start with the governor part. I mean, our job as a governor, my job as a governor, is to assess legislation that comes to me and either veto it or not. Had a bill come to me with a 7-0, in my judgment, racially gerrymandered congressional district solution, I would veto it. You can't disenfranchise 25% of this state's population and feel like you've done something positive. I mean, look, the both sides are responsible for the current congressional map based on the last census of 10 years ago. Republicans and Democrats drew this map. To all of a sudden intervene in a process that has been well settled and allows for input from both sides, as we do every 10 years at post-census, to interrupt that process in such a political and inappropriate way just is wrong. I mean, we got 3 more years till another census. We'll have our census. If the congressional districts need to be redrawn to accommodate population shifts in this state, they'll be redrawn. And both Republicans and Democrats will have input into that process.
Would you keep the current the same process that we used back in 2020, I think technically 2021, or would you want to see a different way for handling redistricting in South Carolina?
Look, we're going to have to redistrict based on what the Supreme Court says to us over the next 2 or 3 years. The rules are changing, as this recent Supreme Court decision made clear. I don't particularly like the way the rules are changing, but we need to have an opportunity for input from the legislature, as we do every 10 years, and that process is going to yield a result. If it's a result that I feel like is racially gerrymandered or inappropriate for some other identifiable reason, then we'll have to go back to the drawing board. But the process is there for a reason. And I guess the other disturbing thing, Nick, is that our legislature moved to address this problem in 3 days. We have much more pressing problems. We've got 500,000 South Carolinians with no health insurance. We've got an infrastructure, conservation, and development problem. And I talk about all 3 of those together because they fit together. We've got big issues that we ought to address equally as rapidly. but with input from both sides. And it's, this whole process just needs to disturb everybody. It happens too fast with no real ability for the legislators to talk to their constituents back home and get some sense of what the right thing to do is. So, I don't like anything about the way this went down. I think it's wrong. And it's kind of like cheating. It's not the way we're supposed to do things here.
Well, I think when we did the last redistricting, it took something like 4 or 5 months to get the lines drawn, haggle out a couple of different maps, and then get input from communities as well. And I don't think that we obviously didn't see that here. And I think that there's also a concern, and I think you sort of hinted at it, which is that we often get to the last couple of weeks of the legislature and we say, there's no time for X, Y, or Z. But when there's enough political support for one thing, all of a sudden there's enough time to get extremely complicated things done.
There is enough time to do anything that we care enough about.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question on this topic, though, because the political pressure is something that we can't discount.
Right.
If it's a Democratic president, say, 20 years ago, Bill Clinton calls you up, you're the governor, and he says, hey, Billy, I really want you to redistrict the state so that we can have a stronger majority in Congress. What do you say to the president?
No. That's what you say. You say no. There's a process for doing it. It applies to Republicans and it applies to Democrats. And we need to trust that process. You said it yourself. It took 4 or 5 months to sort this out last time. And members of the legislature, both in the House and the Senate, had time to talk to their constituents. They had time to figure out, it's a precinct by precinct analysis, where they fall, why they fall there, what's the most logical representation. And you can look, at the districts right now, it looks like a dog threw up on the carpet. I mean, if they make sense, they only make sense in the context of deliberative discussion between legislators and their constituents in a negotiation between Republicans and Democrats. To do that in 3 days makes no sense, and it's wrong.
Yeah, you're absolutely right in the sense that the maps are politically drawn, and both sides have no qualm saying that very expressly. That this is a political process.
It's a political process, but I don't want to underestimate. I mean, the racial overlay on that process is, and the analysis of it is critical. You cannot accept a 7 congressional state with no African American representation. That makes no sense. Put Supreme Court precedent aside, the math just makes no sense. You can't disenfranchise 25% of the state. It is. We will have bad results across every public policy issue if we do that. I mean, the fact of the matter is a quarter of this state is black. They need a voice in what we do up and down the issue pile. And we would have disenfranchised them with the map that the president wanted drawn.
I mean, I think that does, though, suggest that, a white representative can't represent black people. I mean, that can't be true.
No, it isn't, and it's not true. But just look at the districts and the way they fell. We had one congressional district that approached a 50% black population, and we had one African American representative in Congress who happens to have the interest of South Carolina at heart all the time, not just black South Carolinians, but all of us. I mean, Jim Clyburn has been an incredible steward of this state's needs. I can't say enough about the job he's done. And I know a whole bunch of white Republicans that would say the same thing, which is why you got the result you got yesterday. I think that was as much about the life and commitment of Jim Clyburn and his voice for his constituents as it was about anything.
Yeah, I think Shane Massey made the point that it's helpful to have a strong voice for South Carolina when there's a Democratic president and a Republican president, and I think you have that with Clyburn and Graham.
And look, I know Jim's expressed his opinion when Bill Clinton was president, and I was a supporter of Jim's in his first race in 1992, and have been ever since. But Jim would often tell the president that he disagreed with stuff we were doing. He was a strong voice in the welfare reform issues, and he expressed himself to a Democratic president in the strongest terms possible. Jim is a good, fair man and a wonderful congressional representative.
All right, we've got a lot of other issues that we should touch on before any of this wraps up here. You've already mentioned healthcare. I think that this is probably one of the top issues on your platform. What would you do about the healthcare system in South Carolina as governor?
Right. So I'm going to give you an easy answer, but this is an area I've spent most of my adult life in. As I say, I chaired the board of Prisma Health, the largest hospital system. I chaired the board of the Spartanburg Regional Cancer Foundation. And I'm on the board of MD Anderson, which is the #1 rated cancer hospital in the world. And I teach healthcare policy at Wofford. I care deeply about this issue because, as you know, on a macroeconomic level, we spend more per capita on healthcare than any other country in the world by almost twofold. And our results are somewhere between Hungary and Latvia in healthcare outcomes. To your question about South Carolina, the only way to solve the major problems we have in healthcare is Medicaid expansion. There is no other answer. Medicaid expansion not only allows us to cover 500,000 uninsured South Carolinians, which, by the way, that number is going to grow as the Affordable Care Act subsidies, premium subsidies, run off over the next 18 months. And we're going to find that, 500,000 number to be closer to 600,000. Medicaid expansion allows us, obviously, to cover those. But as you also know, Nick, every single uninsured South Carolinian gets health care. They go to the emergency room. That's the most expensive place for health care to take place. So the reason your premiums go up and mine have gone up is hospitals have to subsidize that what they call uncompensated care from all those uninsured folks. They raise our premiums. That's the only way to pay for this. So Medicaid expansion insures the uninsured. It will reduce our premiums. In states that have embraced Medicaid expansion, premiums come down somewhere between 9 and 13%. We will insure an additional about 50% of veterans. Most people think the VA takes care of all the veterans needs. It doesn't. A lot of that will come through Medicaid expansion. And extremely important to underserved communities, all the rural hospitals are closing. They're closing because most of their patients are Medicaid patients or Medicare patients. There's not a sufficient number of patients with private health insurance to subsidize those hospitals, like I just said. So they're closing. You can't run a hospital when you're losing millions of dollars a year. So, Medicaid expansion solves a whole lot of problems, and it is up to the governor to initiate that process.
What does that cost folks in, say, tax dollars?
So there's something called a match that we have to come up with, right? And the President Trump's big, beautiful bill has made the process of actually getting Medicaid expansion done much more difficult. Fair enough, but it's not too difficult. We can figure that out. It's going to cost the state about $300 million a year for the first few years in what we call the state's Medicaid match obligation. Here's the thing, Nick. Hospitals, the major hospitals in this state, I watch this every day at Prisma. The major hospitals in the state have about $3.5 to $4 billion a year of uncompensated care that they provide. $3.5 to $4 billion a year of uncompensated care. So there is a way for the business community, the hospitals, and other folks who benefit from Medicaid expansion. We can find $300 million. We just spent $2 billion to entice Scout Motors to build here. We can find $300 million to extend health care to 500,000 South Carolinians.
I don't want to go back to redistricting at all, but when they were considering all this, they estimated it cost about $2.5 million to do another primary, whatever. So
it's closer to 15 all in.
When you say there's money out there definitely is. I want to talk about farmers though, because this is another part of your platform that I think that you've made pretty prominent here. You say that we've watched as farmers across the state are getting pushed out by international conglomerates buying up farmland, destroying family-owned local businesses. promises. Can you expand on that? And again, what you would do as governor to address some of these issues that farmers are facing?
Sure. So lots to unpack here. In Greenville County, where I was raised, in the I think it was the late 1940s, there were almost 1,000 black-owned farms. Today, there are fewer than a dozen. And the pace of development in South Carolina. So we've added 1 million people in the last 15 years. We're going to add 1 million more in the next 10. We are absolutely not ready. And one of the places we're not ready is how we protect family farmers from unmanaged development and growth. Let me give you 2 examples. I used to go bird hunting in Manning, South Carolina, with my father. And we would bird hunt over lots of family farm fields that we would either ask permission from the owner, or in some cases we knew the owners at the time. 2 of those places I used to go hunting are now tract homes. In Lawrence County, where we used to bird hunt as well, it's a shopping center. I mean, we've got to find a way, and there are ways to help incent family farmers to hold on to their farms and not sell them at 10x their value to the march of all kinds of things, including data centers. I mean, that's kind of the most recent talking point that everybody's all over. The data centers need huge amounts of land. They need huge amounts of power and water. And they're paying farmers. I mean, if I owned a farm and somebody offered me, $2 million for something that's probably worth 1/10 of that, I'd probably sell it too. But we got to find a way to keep that from happening. There are pretty amazing, newly incubated kind of investment opportunities to help farmers, pay farmers to hang on to their farms. We've got to incent more South Carolina grown farm products, whether they're edible farm products or timber, and to just find markets for farmers to hang on to their family farms. And I want to add to that, Nick, it's not just farms. I mean, we've got this same problem with clean water, with salt marshes, estuaries, beaches, oceans. Development puts tremendous pressure on all of the really sacred places that we have in the state. Thankfully, and I'll give Governor McMaster tremendous credit, he's a dedicated conservationist. We've preserved about 3.5 million acres of this state, and we need to preserve somewhere between 3 and 5 million more. That's really complicated. It requires public-private partnerships along with private philanthropy. But we are at I would almost say, a unique and magical moment in our state where Republicans and Democrats agree on the need for conservation to be an overriding priority. And I think we can do an amazing amount of good around the legacy for our children and grandchildren by preserving the beautiful places in this state.
It sounds like you're saying we don't need a developer as governor.
Look, I've been in business my whole life. I'm not anti-development. I'm I'm anti-development that makes no sense. And we got a whole lot of that. Y'all have done a much better job in beginning the dialogue around directed development and smart development down here than other places in the state. But that is the future of our state. We have to manage development by having a statewide conservation, infrastructure, and development plan that all fit together. We don't have that right now.
If you were to be governor, you'd obviously, I don't want to assume, but you would very likely have to deal with supermajorities in both the House and the Senate in this state. You're going to get some controversial bills that'll get passed, sent to your desk. I want to know how you would, whether you would sign or not sign, a bill like something along the lines of an even more restrictive abortion bill.
I would veto anything that looked like Senate Bill 1095 as fast as I could find an ink pen. I have 3 daughters and 2 stepdaughters. 2 of my 3 daughters have the BRCA1 cancer gene. They have a significantly elevated likelihood of having breast or ovarian cancer. That bill arguably criminalizes selective in vitro fertilization so that my girls can't move back home. That's wrong. That bill is wrong for so many reasons. We don't have enough time to talk about it. We already have a restrictive abortion bill, women's reproductive rights bill in this state, or lack of rights in this state. I can't change that. My job as governor is to enforce the law. I will inherit that current piece of legislation. But if anything is more restrictive by 1 minute, I will veto it.
Another big topic for conservatives, again, something that you'll likely see if you are governor, is the conversation around transgender issues.
Right.
Women, protecting women's sports, things like that. We already have laws on the books about this, but I'm curious how you would react to, say, things like a bathroom bill or preventing transgender athletes from playing in women's sports.
Let's start with the facts here. Look, as far as I have been able to understand, there's somewhat less than a dozen transgender athletes playing sports at a high school or college level in South Carolina. That number may be wrong, but it ain't wrong by much. We have 500,000 uninsured people. I mean, folks can talk about transgender stuff, bathroom issues, all they want, and I'll have to evaluate whatever legislation comes to my desk. I'm not going to talk about that stuff. It doesn't fill a pothole. It doesn't insure an uninsured South Carolinian. It doesn't help us preserve our beautiful places or pave a road or help our education system. Those are not issues that people every day care about as it affects their lives. We have an affordability crisis. I'm not, as a friend of mine says, Democrats often want to talk about bathroom issues, and it's the smallest room in the house. We need to be talking about issues around the kitchen table.
I've asked all of the conservatives this as well, so now I'm gonna pitch it to you in the opposite direction here. What's your most conservative position?
I am pretty much as defined by kind of my parents' teaching to me. I'm a pretty conservative Democrat. I had a shotgun when I was 3 years old, and my father made me carry it around till I was 8 before I could shoot it. So I'm pro Second Amendment. I believe that the gun laws should be restrictive enough to prevent those who shouldn't own guns from owning them. So I'm pro Second Amendment, and as I said, on social issues, I'm pretty conservative as well, which is not to say I'm not going to have to deal with these issues if they get to my desk, but I'm going to talk about stuff that matters to South Carolinians and governing every day. And some of these other issues, to me, are a distraction from what we ought to be talking about.
All right, let's wrap this up because we are in a very conservative state.
Yep.
I think the odds are very much against the Democratic Party. In a statewide race like the governor's race, we're just calling balls and strikes here.
Yep.
How do you win? What's your message to voters?
So I'm going to win. I only got in this race. I'm not a career politician. I'll never run for another political office. This is the only job I want because I think I'm qualified both on an experience level and a passion level to lead the state on the issues that matter. Two things about how I win. Number one, people are absolutely sick of divisive politics, both from a rhetorical perspective and from an on-the-ground perspective. What we hear in the dialogue now, and you can go back as recently as the conversation about South Carolina State University's commencement speaker or some of the rhetoric around redistricting yesterday. People want civility. They want respect. They want to know that their governor is going to listen to people who he doesn't agree with and respect those opinions. The only way it's the difference, Nick, between governing and politics. I'm all about governing. I'm going to leave politics behind. And I think moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans and some conservative Republicans, they want a return to what politics was like when my parents were growing up. Nobody said, gee, I can't vote for her because she's a Democrat, or I can't vote for him because he's a Republican. They said, we vote for the person. And that's the kind of politics that I think our state deserves.
Well, it's worked for some other Democrats in other red states.
Yep.
We'll see if it works for you as well come the primary, then November as well. But thanks for joining me. I really appreciate your time, and good luck out there on the campaign trail.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the time.
Make sure you stay subscribed to the We the Palmetto podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. And of course, you can watch the video versions on our Live 5 streaming platform on Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, and of course online as well. That's going to be it for this one. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in the next one.